So do you start recording your podcast first, or do you plan it, or is there something like in between that has to happen before you actually start recording your podcast? I don't know. I guess I'm pretending like I'm a reporter. Like I'm asking you the questions, but really I don't know. This isn't even, y'all, it's not even plugged into anything. This was just a fun little prop that I was going to use for today's video. But we are going to talk about recording your podcast because I get questions all the time about how I actually do this and what the steps are behind the scenes. So let me show you how it's done. Let's get right to it. Hey y'all, Crystal here today, and like I said in the beginning, we are going to talk about recording your podcast episodes in segments, okay? Like we've had other videos like this one right here all about how to format your solo podcast, but today I wanted to put a spin on it where we talk about how I format my episodes, but also how to incorporate that into an interview style, right? We've done solo videos, like there's actually a whole playlist right here that I'll link to that you can check out if you're a solo podcaster. But I know that we have a lot of people in this community that are looking to branch out into interviews, or they're thinking, I might want to do that, but what is actually involved in creating an interview episode and what does that look like? So that's what we're going to talk about. So first and foremost, we have to talk about how you're going to format your podcast. Now, like I said, we have some videos that I'll link to in the description below that are about how you actually format your show, like where's your hook and your calls to action, and are you gonna have a main theme? Like all those things will be linked below in this video description. But my question is, what is the length of your episode going to be? Like how long are your episodes going to be? Or if you're doing an interview, how long is that going to last? And the reason why I ask this question is because whenever you define the boundaries of how your podcast is going to be formatted, then you can tell your guest what to expect. So great example, if you've listened to the Proffitt Podcast, you can check it out right here. This is my weekly show, comes up every Tuesday and Thursday. But if you listen to the interviews that I do on my show, you'll notice that they run anywhere from a 35-minute episode up to an hour long. It just depends on the topic. It depends on the guest. It depends on how much we riff off of one another, or if we are trying to stay super laser focused on the topic at hand. But whenever I have a guest, like they will schedule their interview, and then we're gonna talk about scheduling here in a second because I have a great tip for you. But they'll schedule their interview and then we will record it. And before we start recording, I say, hey, just so you know, we are planning to be here between 30 and 45 minutes, just depending on where the conversation takes us. But I also send all of my guests my show guidelines. You can actually check out this podcast episode right here of the Proffitt Podcast, where we go into detail on what show guidelines are, and you can grab your own template. Yes, like the exact guidelines I send to all of my guests. You can check out the template in the video description below because I wanted you to know exactly what happens behind the scene. So that's a little bit about podcast formatting. Now, let's talk about the next question, recording. So this may or may not be a surprise to you, but I actually record the interview before I do any of the other intro, outro, any of that. I want to have the solid foundation, which is the skeleton of the episode, right? That's the meat and potatoes, okay? Like I live in Texas. We can talk about meat and potatoes and all the good stuff, all the yummy eats, and I'm getting hungry. But we can talk about all those things because that is the main portion of that podcast episode. It's the interview. It is what like the skeleton of what we're building around. I will create my intro and my outro after I have recorded the interview. So the first step in recording is to record the interview, have the conversation with my guest, and then from there, I will separately record the intro, the outro, and any other takeaways or maybe calls to action that I want to have in there. Again, go back and watch the formatting videos that we have linked below because they will help you understand how to have have calls to actions and where to put them and the information that can help you be more successful with formatting your show and where to put it. But logistically speaking, I will schedule an interview, record it, and then I will go and record the other pieces that need to go into that particular episode. So I want you to tell me in the comments below, are you doing mostly solo podcast or are you doing interviews only? Or a mixture of the two? I always like to know what kind of podcasters we have in this community here. I know we have some solo and some interview platforms. So let me know in the comments if you're doing solo, interview, or a mixture of the two. Okay, let's get back to the video. So before we moved on, I mentioned earlier about how I use my calendar and schedule my episodes. I actually want you to go watch this video right here. It is all about how I use a tool called Calendly to get people scheduled and interviewed, because I no longer do the back and forth email like, hey, I'm available this Wednesday at 12. Oh, no, you're not? Okay, what about Thursday at 9? No, that doesn't work. I don't do any of that anymore. So go watch this video about Calendly and how I use it for my interviews, because it actually plays into the third step, which is editing everything all together. So like I said, I will record the interview and then I will record the intro and the outro. And then if I'm using my guest's bio, they actually send that to me whenever they schedule themselves to be recorded, right? Like they get on the calendar and I ask, one of the required questions is, what is the bio that you want to include for this episode? And I end up reading that. So whenever I read that and record it, I edit that into the episode. So that's the third step today. We talked about your podcast format. We talked about recording. Now we need to talk about editing everything together. So I like to have all of the pieces, all of my audio files recorded and recorded and ready to go. So whenever I edit the whole thing together and I hit publish or I schedule it out, which is what I recommend you do, schedule it out to air on the day when your episode needs to drop, then it's all ready to go. So let me know in the comments what questions you have about podcast interviews, scheduling interviews, or anything else about podcast formats, because I would love to answer your questions. That's all I have for you today. So make sure you hit that thumbs up on this video if you found it helpful. Subscribe below so you don't miss our future videos all about podcasting and running your online business. Make sure you check out these other videos right here, all about podcasting and running your online business. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.